Good afternoon. And let me tell you why I'll never work at a psych hospital again. Oh! Good afternoon, everybody. How you feeling? So, like I said, and you could tell from the title, Psych Hospital Blues. So it's kind of a play on words because the particular psych hospital I worked at, and I worked there as a mental health tech or psych tech or whatever you want to call it, and we had to wear blue scrubs. And so first we were wearing like Smurf blue scrubs, then we were wearing like these darker blue scrubs. But that's not what we're here to talk about, right? What we want to talk about is a couple things. First off, just me as a guy, I think when I started working there, started working at a psych hospital back in 2007. So I may have been, like in my early 30s, 32, 33, something like that. So, it was cool. Met a lot of good people. There were a lot of guys working there. It was more male dominant at the time because, with the patients, a lot of them, they would be there. Of course, they didn't want to be there, and they would be, a little unruly. So, we had more guys there to keep them in line. Also, too, we had some great women, and I'll tell you a little later. But as time went on, it became a little more woman dominant as far as working in the hospital. So I first started working there because, of course, I'd never worked at a psych hospital before. So I'm thinking to myself, this can't be too bad. This is going to be, kind of just like a regular job, except, some people just get upset, right? Because I've dealt with it before. Like, let's face it, like I grew up in a neighborhood, a rough neighborhood. So I kind of know, sometimes things can get critical, But what I wasn't expecting was to, which I'm gonna tell you about a little later, watch something that really made me like, and also getting baptized. That's right, I got baptized at a psych hospital. And so for some of y'all out there who know, you know what I'm talking about. So, but anyway, started off, I was working 3 to 11. And anybody that works at a psych hospital or, any hospital, does any social services, no, 3 to 11 is a rough shift because you got to kind of center your life around. I mean, you could do stuff earlier during the day, but like around 12:30, 1 o'clock, you start getting that feeling in your stomach like, oh man, I got to get ready to go to work. I'm already worn out from whatever I was doing yesterday, and I don't feel like it. And then on top of it, everybody else that did first shift, they're already, they're going to be on their way out. So, and I remember somebody used to work with Kia. I used to be like, Dad, Key, when I would see her leaving 7 to 3, I'd say, Dad, I really wish I really wish I was leaving and not having had to stay and do this 3 to 11 shift. And like I told people before, just imagine working a 3 to 11. And I know a lot of us out here have done it. You work in the 3 to 11, you get invited to that barbecue, that cookout or whatever. And damn well, by the time you go to a cookout, especially with black people, guess what? Only thing you gonna get is maybe a soda and some sides. Ain't none of the meat gonna be done. Ain't no matter of fact, they might not even be there yet. You know what I'm saying? So it really like drove me bonkers to have to continue to go in there at 3 to 11. But we all need a job, so you do what you got to do. So that's what I did, right? Now, I did that for a few years, then I wound up switching over and working 7 to 3. Working 7 to 3, a lot of people don't like it. I don't want to say a lot. Some people don't like it because, they have a tough time getting up. But because, I had no problems getting up early. I was always up early anyway, 6 o'clock in the morning anyway. So I just was used to going in and, being there, on time or near on time. So here we go. You start working in there. And if you've ever worked at a psych hospital before, first off, you start to realize a couple of things really quick. You start to realize that there really is a hierarchy. So, you have your psych techs who we basically run the floor. You have your nurses who basically, now when I say run the floor, I'm saying really we know the pulse of the floor. So, we're charged with keeping everything in order, as far as patient wise. And then we have the nurses who, they administer the meds, typically a charge nurse, and I guess would say legally run the floor. Now, some great nurses out there, so they do a great job. But, anybody, once again, that's worked in a psych hospital knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then we have our doctors who are the psychiatrists who actually oversee and meet with and give, whatever diagnoses or prescribe medicines for the nurses to administer to, particular patients. But I'm telling you, one of the worst things for me used to be admissions. And once again, if you know, you know. All right. So my third week there, I'm going, and guy comes in, and I'm like, he comes in, oh man, he comes in with a cane and everything. He has a neck brace on, and he's walking in. And he's probably only about 30 years old at the time. But I'm like, you know what? He had a history in his chart of drug use and everything like that. So he comes in, he's laboring and everything. He has a neck brace on. So, when he sits down, every time I try to touch him, he's like, oh, man. Oh, man, I just can't take it. Because he was a kind of frail guy or whatever. So, once again, I'm a newbie, so I'm feeling a little sorry for him, which I shouldn't have, but I did. So let me tell you how it almost cost me my job that time. So he comes in, he sits down, I'm doing his admission paperwork. Then he's like, you know what, man, I've never been treated so well coming into a psych hospital, man. You're really, really helping me out. I appreciate you. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, all right, cool, good. So we take him. So he has this big thing around his neck, like the neck, kind of like a neck brace thing, but it was like the one that you have Velcro that you could take on and off. So he had it on. So, of course, I go and I'm like, dang, this dude is in so much pain. I don't want to even mess with him. So it's like I go and he was like, oh. So I was like, you know what, man, just, we'll get all your stuff together because we had him in gowns, searched him and all that. We'll get, so go ahead to your room. So he goes to his room. So as the days are going, on, he's getting more and more belligerent, right? And so what happens is that what I come to find out, because, more and more belligerent when people tried to wake him up and stuff. And I was like wondering what was going on. So needless to say, after extensive search, the guy was hiding Percocets inside of the neck thing, the neck brace or whatever it was. So what he did was, because it was, mostly foam with the Velcro strap, what he did was before he got in there, he cut inside of the Velcro strap and he stuffed like 6 to 7 perks or however many in there. Because I think when they finally found out, and you know how they found out? Because guess what he did? He said, oh yeah, that guy, he's the one that did my search. He never looked. He never looked he never took my neck brace off because I don't know why he did it. 3 months in, almost fired. What the heck is going on here? Psych hospital blues. So anyway, they let me off the hook with that one, right? So I always tell people, even when you do get fired, there's probably at least 7, 8, 9, 10 other times when you could have been fired, but you just got lucky. It wasn't your time. Getting baptized. So a lot of times in psych hospitals, as people may know that have worked in them, you will have people that come in, they're religiously preoccupied, right? So they're like, God didn't tell me to come here. God didn't. I'm like, I didn't tell you to come here either, but okay. God will break me out of here, or the Lord only understands what I'm going through. I don't need any of those meds. I'm just going to sit in here and I'm not going to take anything. So had one lady, so she comes in and so she will walk up and down the hall with her Bible and really pleasant. She say, hey, how are you doing, Greg? How are you feeling today? I'm blessed. The Lord has blessed me. And I'd say, because, I'm a Christian. So I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm talking about. Somebody that comes in here that understands the Lord, that holds her Bible high, and that just wants to, be a good person and get out. But she didn't want to take her meds. So, she's going, now we're on like the 3rd or 4th day, something like that. And she's still not taking her meds. But now, instead of just kind of like walking up and down the halls, she's kind of like speed walking up and down the halls, but she still has the Bible in her hand, right? So, still nice person. Hey, good morning, Greg. So then she gets to the room And we had these things at most psych hospitals, even at regular medical hospitals, where it's called a one-on-one or one-to-one, where you sit down with a patient, or you have to observe a patient, just the staff member, because of, whatever precaution they may have. And so while my back is turned, she's in the room and she sounds like she's talking in tongues or something like that. But she's just ramping up. But, she's always been nice to me. So, hey, what would she do to me? I'm sitting there and the lady starts yelling at the top of her lungs. Once again, I'm still not paying any attention. She comes and dumps 2 big cups on the top of my head. Greg, you need to be baptized. Something's wrong with you. You need it. You really need it. And I remember I jumped up and I said, you know what? Since you're a woman, I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm not going to touch you. I said, but yo, I got baptized at a psych hospital. Couldn't believe it, right? And I know, because down the line, we'll get into different stories at another time. But just wanted to share that with you. And also wanted to give, because the Center for Disease Control says that there are at least 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5 Americans who suffer from some type of mental illness, just different levels of acuity and severity. So, but it's something that we definitely have to take serious. And it's something that, even me working in there, you start to get used to it. But I will say this, and these are one of the couple of tips, because this is really directed towards the people that work in there, worked, or still working there, is that for me, and I started to share this with people, is that there is definitely, in my estimation, depending on which part of the hierarchy you're at, but definitely as a psych tech, I would say 35 years old. Now, the reason I say 35 years old is because there comes a point where, just like with me, I started seeing, a lot of the younger nurses coming in, even a lot of younger doctors and stuff. So it makes you start to question your own sense of where you're at with life. So it starts to play sometimes somewhat of a mental toll on you. Secondly, the only way to really make the money in a psych hospital is that as a tech, is that you have to do an inordinate amount of overtime. And me, once I started having kids, once you started trying to raise a family, do stuff like that, you were working 16 hours a day isn't good for the kids. It's not good for your wife or girlfriend. And it's definitely not good for you, because it makes you tired and irritable. I darn almost became a cop working in there. That's how I started to feel. Like anytime I heard something, I was looking around, acting crazy, and I would start doing the same thing at home. So I would say at a certain point, get yourself out of there. Try to, get another profession, go back to school, whatever you want to do, but get out of there, because it will start to drive you bonkers. You hear me? And I'm trying to, be politically correct and say the right words and everything like that. And one thing that I realized was, and it was probably, I should have listened to it a couple years earlier before I wind up getting canned out of there. Yes, I did get fired, but once again, we'll save that for a later time. Is that I broke my wrist. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. There you go, right here. Broke my wrist, right? Broke my wrist. Dealing with a patient who was about, because I'm almost 6 feet tall, so a patient who was about 6'3", 300 pounds. And as a guy, and guys notice when you're in there and you're testosterone driven and you got your own adrenaline and your own ego, you start to get into some of these combats that, you don't even need to get into. And I thought I was winning the combat until somebody else I work with came over and hit the guy. So the guy falls backwards on my wrist, right? Out for 3 months, bunch of therapy and an ugly scar, right? So you got to know when to get out of there too. So I'm talking to any of my friends out there that work in any of these high level, and it's not just physical, it's mental, and you do not want to be somewhere that mentally drains you for a certain period of time. And I'm telling you, as you get older, your level of dealing with you may have a little more patience, but your level of dealing with ignorance and BS goes out the window. because you've dealt with it for so long. When you're younger, you're working at a job, you get invited to all the parties. So y'all all hanging out, y'all going to the bar or whatever after work. But as you get older, as you have kids, if you're a responsible an adult, you start thinking to yourself, I'm just trying to make it home each day, the same way that I came. So what I want you to do is that, think about it. Psych hospitals are, they're not for softies. All right. So if you're a softie working in a psych hospital, you may want to, or if you're softy before you even go in, you may want to think about choosing a different place to work, because it's going to test you. They're going to test you. But anyway, as far as for me, that's why I said at the beginning, you know what? I'm thinking, would I work at Burger King or somewhere before I work back at, what's the name? Nah, because the Whoppers aren't the same anymore. But anyway, thank you for listening. And hey, just like I always say, live life. Don't let life live you.